Hello and welcome to part 2 of this lecture on IT alignment from the Institute for CIO Excellence. Just a little bit of review from part 1. I want to talk again about each of the 5 steps of IT alignment. The first step of IT alignment, of course, was we need to know what the strategy is. If we're going to be tuning the IT expenditures to maximize its effectiveness, its impact on the business strategy of the company, then we need to know what the business strategy of the company is. All right, so step 1 of IT alignment is to get a list of the strategic business goals. This list has to be owned by the CEO, and not just in passing, but it has to be emphatically owned by the CEO. It has to be his list, it has to be his priorities, and it has to be advertised to the other CXOs that that's true. Then once that list of strategic business goals is created, step 2 is to get a list of the CXO initiatives to help make that happen. So each of the other CXOs will envision ways that they can use the resources in their budget to help accomplish the strategic business goals, and so you need to know what those are. Then in step 3, we have this discovery process where we're going to go about discovering hidden, that means things we're not currently working on or currently thinking about, but new ideas that we haven't even considered yet. We're going to go try and discover hidden opportunities for IT to help accomplish the stuff at step 1 and the stuff at step 2. And we're going to build a list of those. That list oftentimes is 50 or more items long. It's not that we're going to go build those, we're just going to collect the list, we're going to prioritize, probably only end up building the top 1, 2, or 3 of the things on the list. But if we want to do a good job of maximizing the value that IT brings to the company strategically, we have to have a lot of choices to choose from. Now we will talk later about good ways to go about getting this, but that's step 3. Step 4 then will be to prioritize the items that come out of this list at step 3, and then figure out which ones we're going to resource and how that resourcing is going to be done. Oftentimes it's done by redeploying resources from things you are working on now to these new ideas. Then step 5 is the post-project audit. Phase. This step is actually the most important for the CIO to gain the full credibility and the full credit for being a strategic value creator. If you're not doing this step very rigorously and very systematically, then as a CIO, you're giving away much of the political clout that you otherwise would be accruing. Okay, so these are the 5 steps of IT alignment. And now we want to delve into each of these in a little bit more detail to talk about what might be difficult at each of those steps. Well, let's start with looking here at step 4. This is the first step that occurs to a lot of CIOs, is going to be politically tricky in the organization. Because when we talk about identifying new ideas that we hadn't seen before, and we talk about how we're going to get those resourced, I mean, it's great if you can go back to the CFO and get more money beyond your current IT budget, but in the real world that doesn't happen very often. I have seen it some, but normally that's not the case. Normally the CFO is going to say, look, you've got an IT budget. If you want to rearrange what you're doing inside there, feel free, but I'm not giving you any more money than what's already in the budget. And so what this means is if you're going to start being strategic, you're going to quit being tactical. Translation, you're going to start having to say no more to the other CXOs that have brought you, or their people have brought you, requests for IT support. So let's go to our slide here and help illustrate this. In this slide on the left, we have hypothesized a list, just for example's sake, of the current projects portfolio that you will have under development before you do IT alignment. So let's say that we have a SaaS ERP implementation, and let's say, and what I put in parentheses here just for the sake of comparison is the estimated internal rate of return for each of these projects. So the SaaS ERP has a 55% estimated internal rate of return. Then we have an e-commerce initiative going on that has a 40% estimated internal rate of return, a new inventory system at 35%. We're going to pretend for a moment that I know how to spell upgrade properly. We're going to upgrade our desktops at 22%, new LAN server at 18%, etc. And then once we do the IT alignment process at step 3, and then step 4 under prioritization, we're going to prioritize and identify, let's say, 4 new systems. Again, we maybe came up with a list of 50 or 60 or 70 potentially valuable new ideas. But we're only going to take a look at these 4 best solutions that have come out of that IT alignment discovery process. So we have a new marketing data mining initiative that we're estimating has 130% IRR. We have an e-commerce CSR system initiative. We have a new production quality control initiative and new customer incentives card initiative. Okay. So what we're going to do is we're going to build this new list. So it says here, now that the new projects portfolio list has more projects than IT has resources, we have to create a cutoff line. And that cutoff line represents the point at which we run out of resources as we move from the top of the list down. So some of the new systems that we've identified out of the IT alignment process are now going to get resourced, but some of the things that we were working on or were going to be working on didn't make the cutoff. So in this particular example, let's say that means the new inventory system and the upgrade of the desktops and the new LAN server and the new WAN upgrade and the new customer service app. Each of those is going to either be canceled or postponed till a later year, or put on hold until the CFO can find more money, if that's what the requirement is going to be. So the question is, when you draw that cutoff line, who's going to care? Well, that new inventory system is probably something that the COO has been wanting for several years, been waiting for it. Finally, it got prioritized and funded, and it's under development or about to be under development, and the COO is excited about it, and now you're going to go to him and you're going to say, No, not going to do that, because we have something more important to do for the company. Now, he might well agree that you've got more important in terms of business value projects to do, but that's still his pet project. And so you can start to see where this is going to get a little politically tricky. Then the next three that we have on there, the desktop upgrade, the LAN server upgrade, and the WAN upgrade. The people who probably care the most about those are your own people in the IT department. They've been counting on that. That's Christmas for them this year. That's what they get excited about. And all of a sudden now you have to go to them and you say, you know what, these things that y'all were excited about, we're going to do more important things with our IT budget than buy new technology. We're going to create business advantage. Some of you can imagine how that's going to go over with your people, and so that could engender morale issues inside IT. And then this new customer service app, again, that's probably another COO. So we look at this and we notice that with our prioritization process, we've got this issue about how do we deal with the fact that we're going to have to now be saying no to people that we're counting on some of these tactical things being done so that we can do strategic things instead. And what's your action plan? Well, here's what we recommend. You'll begin to get a reputation for being a hard-line strategic value creation proponent if you actually stick to the new plan. In other words, yeah, you do want to go to the COO and you want to say, nope, got more strategically important things to do with the company. And you go to your own people and say, nope, got more business strategic things that we should be doing with the budget rather than buying this new technology. That's starting to change your reputation. It's starting to give you a reputation as a hardline business value creator, which is sort of the whole point behind IT alignment. IT will begin to be viewed by the CFO and the other CXOs as a strategically oriented profit center, as opposed to a cost center that only provides IT services. This is also a very good thing for your future and the future of the company. Now, a little bit of politics behind the scenes here that puts you in an advantageous position. Why not have a discussion with that COO and talk to him or her about just how important that new inventory system is. And maybe that COO can go with you to the CFO to request more funding, or maybe that COO can find some of that funding in his own budget if it's that important to him. And then when your people inside IT see that you're really very serious about this notion of what we're going to do with IT from now on is become a strategic value creator for the company, they're going to start shifting their focus, which you actually want to have happen. You want them to be on board with you. You can't be a lone ranger, moving one direction and your whole IT department moving in a different direction. IT people by default tend to be happier with technical solutions. And so this is a time for some leadership development and for some shifting of vision and priorities, and for starting to cultivate a culture inside IT that is in support of this notion of being better strategic value creation. And then when the other CXOs see your commitment to using IT resources to just creating strategic value, you're going to get more cooperation from them in the future in helping you move through the IT alignment process, in doing the prioritization pieces, in helping you come up with additional funding for some of these ideas. all of this, yeah, it's a challenge, but it's a challenge worth taking on if you want to establish yourself in the eyes of your CEO and the rest of the leadership team in the company as an effective strategic value creator. And so IT alignment is an example here of a process that's going to help you do that. But again, not without growing pains. Now let's take a look at this step next. In what ways have we seen just making step one happen be challenging for the CIO? Well, we've seen lots of things over the years, and I'm just going to list some of them here. The first is some CEOs resist the notion of coming up with a short list of strategic business goals. The problem with a strategic goal list that has 10 things on it is it doesn't require the whole leadership team to focus on the same goals. Nobody can do 10 things, and so all of a sudden you have different CXOs taking their pick of which of those 10 things they want to be focused on. And if they all try and do 10 things, none of them will likely get done very well. And so there's a lot of merit in this notion of the CEO forcing the leadership team to focus on what are really the very highest 1, 2, or 3 business strategy priorities for the company. And the company will make far greater progress if those business strategies are chosen properly. Also, metrics for success. So it's one thing to say we want to increase our market share. It's a very different thing to say we want to increase our market share by 3 points over the next 18 months. So when we put metrics on that, we're saying how we're going to measure success and by when that success needs to be accomplished. And the accountability goes way up on the leadership team once those metrics are put on those strategic business goals. The reticence that we've seen on the part of some CEOs to do that is they know that if they set those metrics too low, that they may not get all the productivity out of their team that they could have gotten. If they set them too high, then they disillusion and disincent their team to even be trying hard because they know that's impossible. They can't hit those goals. And so it's a little tricky in the CEO's mind to pick that set of metrics that are right at the right place to produce maximum productivity while still putting in front of his leadership team attainable strategic business goals. So what we recommend there is that the CEO pulls the whole leadership team into a working group where they, by consensus, end up setting those metrics. And that way they own the metrics for success. That doesn't preclude the CEO from challenging them. I mean, if they say, well, boss, we're sure we can get 1% increase in market share, and he goes, well, I'm sure you can get more. Is that the best you can do? And then they think a little bit and come back and go, well, maybe we can hit 2%. And then he goes, well, what makes you think you can't hit 3? And he gives them a chance to justify why 3 might be an unreasonable goal, and then settles back and go, okay, well, we're going to go for 2. That would be an example of how that would work. Now, what happens if you don't get a short, measurable list of strategic goals that the CEO owns and the other CXOs support? It's just real hard to do IT alignment. IT alignment is a process that you use to maximize impact of the goals on that list. If you don't have goals on the list, it's like entering an archery contest where nobody puts any targets out. It doesn't make sense. All right, so if you're having trouble getting this short, measurable list of strategic goals that the CEO owns, and you want to do IT alignment, what's the challenge that faces the CIO? probably getting the CEO on board with the idea. That may be a short sell, it may be a long sell. Whatever it takes, that becomes the focus now of the CIO. And the CIO needs to begin a campaign to influence the CEO to adopt the notion of doing business this way. Again, for larger corporations, this isn't usually a challenge. I mean, it's very rare that we find a company that's bigger than $1 billion a year company whose CEO hasn't absorbed the wisdom of this lesson and publishes, at least for his leadership team's consumption, publishes a list of short and measurable strategic business goals that he stands behind and insists on year by year. But sometimes we see in smaller companies the CEO hasn't matured to the point to where he understands the importance of that, and that's when the CIO needs to very tactfully begin an education campaign to influence the CEO to change that aspect of how he does leadership in the company. All right, next we want to talk about step 2 here. What makes this difficult in some companies? Normally it isn't, fortunately, but in some companies, if the political environment is not as cooperative as it should be, sometimes you'll find different CXOs in the company being very guarded about what they're thinking of doing until it finally gets approved and funded. Because after all the different CXOs are competing for a limited pool of new capital. And so the CMO might think, hey, if I tell people too early on what I'm planning for initiatives, it's going to give them time to accumulate reasons for why they don't think what I'm doing is a very good idea, and I'm going to get the legs cut out of me on funding. Again, fortunately we don't see that environment too often, but it does show up from time to time. So if you are in a company that's characterized by that, you may find this difficult. The solution there is to help the other CXOs understand the value that IT can bring to their initiatives, giving them greater bang for the buck, so to speak. And unless IT is brought in early on, they're going to come up with initiatives that IT can't support because the IT component is unrealistic or too expensive or whatever. So again, the CIO needs to be building a cooperative spirit of support and help with each of the other CXOs to help make that happen. Now the step 3 process. What's hard about pulling together some sort of discovery process, whether it be a brainstorming process with a group of folks that are supposed to go discover new ideas, or whether it be they come from some other source, and we'll talk in just a bit here about some of those other sources. What's hard about this? As a general rule, the senior IT people involved in the process of coming up with these new hidden initiatives are not going to be in favor of identifying new projects that are going to get the ones that they're currently vested in killed. It hurts. It's like slaying your own child. And so it requires significant leadership on the part of the CIO to get his people or her people refocused and redirected to be doing the more business important things for the company rather than what they've been doing. So that change will be painful for some of your people. But without insisting that you only identify as yet unidentified alternatives, if you don't insist on that, I'll tell you what will happen, because I see it invariably. Your discovery process will only come back and tell you that all the stuff that you're currently working on is the right stuff to be working on. And after all, you were strategically aligned. Congratulations, boss. Let's just keep doing what we've been doing. If that's the answer that you get back, then your people didn't properly understand the requirement. They've wasted their time. They've wasted your time. They've wasted a lot of time on the part of the folks in the business units who've cooperated with the process. You will fail to keep the promises that you've made to the other folks on the senior leadership team to do a better job of using IT to create strategic value for the company. I mean, basically, you're waving the white flag and giving up, and you're allowing your people to do that. So, again, leadership and courage, perseverance is required to get past this point. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about step 3. What does the discovery process look like for identifying these? I used the number earlier, maybe 50 or more possible ideas, things that you're not currently working on or thinking about. So they come from several different sources. The first source that I recommend that you use is a question that Steve Caldwell used to use when he was a CIO at Coca-Cola. Dr. Caldwell is now part of the faculty here at the Institute for CIO Excellence, but when he was a CIO at Coca-Cola back in the 90s, he would convene the leadership team in the company and ask them one question: what behavioral change would be most strategic to our company? And consider behaviors of customers, of vendors, and of employees, and have the leadership team discuss that question, which usually took many different meetings over a several week period of time, and he did that every year. And they talked back and forth about what behavioral change would be most strategic in moving the company forward in terms of value creation. And then once that behavior was identified, Steve Caldwell said, well, what IT does really is change behaviors. So IT is a very powerful behavioral change tool. And so then he took it upon himself to figure out how to build IT systems that would compel, that would encourage and enable that behavioral change. Again, whether it be in the customer or whether it be in the employee or whether it be in the vendor. All right. So ask the question, what behavioral change would be most strategic? And you'll probably get several suggested IT systems as the leadership team discusses that question. The next thing that you want to do is you want to ask a question that we talk about in another lecture when we talk about the Caldwell strategy map. Dr. Caldwell teaches strategic planning, both commercially and at the undergraduate level in the business college at USC Upstate. And basically what Caldwell says, I mean, it's much more detailed than this, but the basic concept here is map out the process by which people become customers of your organization, and get as granular as you can in mapping out that process. And then try and identify where the bottlenecks are. Which steps in that process are holding up the creation of new customers. And then we bring IT to bear on helping to remove the bottlenecks in that process. All right? So the next question is, where are the bottlenecks? In customer creation process. And then you'll note that these two aspects of how we're going to come up with hidden opportunities for IT, these two aspects are things where the CIO would conduct discussions with the other CXOs as they discuss these things together, and then the opportunities for IT would sort of precipitate out of those discussions. Now also, we want to convene what we call an ITAB group, IT Alignment Brainstorming Group. This is a group that, at least initially, when you're first doing this, will be composed of the CIO, some senior IT manager, some junior technical person, the geekiest guy or gal that you've got in IT, even if they're just fresh out of college, just a brand new college hire. And then you want to have 3 or 4 business unit managers. The higher up, the better that will be. And so this is altogether maybe 7 people. And the mission of this team is to first of all consider the strategic business goal list and ask the question, what IT opportunities might we pursue that would help that happen directly? Okay, and then secondly, consider this list of CXO initiatives and ask the question, in what ways could IT be brought to bear on these different CXO initiatives so as to improve their effectiveness and increase their likelihood of success? All right, so this ITAB group then is directing its attention to discovering ways that IT can implement or help implement steps 1 and steps 2 here. Another thing that we do is we go out to, that this group would be charged with, is going out to do a search of the competition. Now these days we do that basically by going out to the competition's websites and just taking a look and see what are they excited about in terms of new developments, what new capabilities are they bragging about, are they talking to their customer base about bringing online. It's amazing how much what probably ought to be proprietary competitive knowledge a company is willing to put out on its website to talk about where it's going in the future. So you want to do a competitive analysis then, where you're going out to the web to discover what's new happening by the competition that perhaps your company should be considering. Then another place to go is out to the consultancy groups. So for instance, perhaps you have a relationship with the Gartner folks, or maybe Forrester, or whomever. Well, those people specialize in understanding what the major new strategic initiatives are that are showing up in different marketplaces. Yours to begin with, but then other companies of similar size to yours, or other industries that might have certain characteristics in common with yours. And get those people to say, here's the new stuff that people are starting to invest in, that we're seeing as providing significant strategic advantage in the future. So you're going to collect all this stuff up, and you're going to build a list of ideas. That's how we do step 3. A lot of work, but I'll tell you, there's a lot of eye-opening that happens when you do this. And the fact that the CIO is driving, sponsoring, enabling all of this discovery means that you're going to get, as a CIO, a lot of credibility here on the part of the other business unit leaders in the company, and here on the part of not only other business people in the company, but even the IT team, your subordinates, in demonstrating that you are focused in creating strategic business value for the company. Okay, as we said, the post-project audit step 5 phase of IT alignment perhaps is the most important step in order for the CIO to both develop significant business impact and then get the credit for that significant business impact. So let's take a look at the slide that I have here on that. You need to decide up front before you get the project funded. So this is still while the proposal is being put together. Make sure that you have a firm grasp on what the business success metrics will be. So we're not talking about things like how fast software is going together, or all the sort of things that your IT project manager would use to make sure that a project is being developed appropriately. Those are not things that we care about in the post-project audit. What we care about here is, all right, well, the reason that we built this system is we were thinking that it was going to increase sales by 2% over the next couple of years. Those then become the success metrics that would show up here. You need to measure how much sales are actually being increased because of this new project, this new system that you're putting together. You also need to decide up front who will collect and report these, and that person needs to actually have time scheduled on the appropriate CXO or CXO's calendars. Whether that's being reported back to you, the CIO, or whether that's being reported to the whole IT governance committee, which is what we recommend, that those appointments are in place for 6 months after implementation, 12 months after implementation, however often that you're going to do this, to ensure that those business metrics are being achieved. And then who is responsible to tweak the project if the measured results fall short of the expected results? Here's the real value in the project. If you're not doing the post-project audit phase of IT alignment, you're likely to make the common mistake of, once an IT project is implemented and working properly and in the hands of the users, IT sort of washes their hands of it and go, we're done. That's wrong. That is robbing your company of the business value that they might otherwise have gotten out of a system if the change management is properly managed, and if the business metrics, if you're not collecting what you thought you would be collecting, and rarely does it happen first time out of the chute, then you have to look into figuring out why are we not achieving those business goals. And that sometimes requires modification in the system. It requires modification in the way you're doing the change management. It may require modifications in other aspects associated with making sure that this business solution is achieving its full potential. But the point is, the management of this as a business solution just begins at implementation. It doesn't end at implementation. And if a CIO isn't involved throughout that whole process after it's implemented until it's really retired years later, as a business solution. If the CIO isn't involved in that and ensure that that management is happening, then almost certainly your new project will fall far short of the business potential that it might otherwise have achieved. All right, so why would you expect this to be painful? Well, there are a lot of reasons for that, and I'm not going to take the time right now to go into it, but obviously this is going to take more time. It's going to divert some of your resources in IT to doing post-project audit stuff when otherwise you might be tempted to pull them into new development. There's increased accountability that you as the CIO have to submit yourself to in the eyes of the rest of the senior leadership team in the company. The list goes on here, but it's not an easy thing to do post-project audit well. And in the in-class course, we go into a lot more detail about how we do the post-project audit. But suffice it to say, that's the general idea behind post-project audit. All right, so now, a couple of final thoughts before we finish this up. Remember, leadership is born in a vacuum. Now, what we mean by that is it's only because there's a vacuum of where leadership ought to be done that allows you to develop as a leader. So you need to look around and you need to find what the company's not doing and then get them to start doing it. This. If you don't have a well-executed process for IT alignment that the rest of the leadership team in the company is involved in, I mean, notice how many steps here they're involved in, all of them. And if you're not properly orchestrating that, then there's a leadership vacuum there, and you need to step into it. If you're timid about stepping into that, then maybe somebody else needs to be the CIO in your company. And sooner or later that will happen. Okay, so a real leader recognizes the need for leadership and just starts leading. A modern competitive CIO is a real leader. And let me just offer an observation here. I've worked with CIOs and CIO wannabes for over a decade now. Helping them be better at what they do, teaching them how to do what they do. Lots of different companies, lots of, probably every industry there is, government, education. Risk-averse people never become great leaders. So if you're a risk-averse person, you might want to reconsider either CIO is a rung too high for you, or you need to figure out how to overcome being risk-averse so that you can start demonstrating the courage and the perseverance, the creativity necessary to step into that leadership vacuum. And again, IT alignment is a great process to use to help guide those efforts in your bid to figure out how to use IT to create more strategic value for the company. So thank you for your attention. We hope we'll have an opportunity to work with you sometime in the future, helping you move through all this. Thank you.